Hey guys, welcome back to the farm. No, you're not going to go in there yet. Not time for you to go in there yet. They're still in there eating their food. You remember in last video I talked to you about the, come on, get your cameo over. Go on. Goodness gracious, camera hogs. I talked to you about the colts having worms possibly, and me getting a stool sample turned in. The colts are 5 months old, and you typically don't do any vaccinations or any antibiotics or anything on them until they're 6 months old. So the vet is scheduled to come out on November the 15th. But Titus is looking super healthy, but Max, his belly is getting, really swollen. I mean, they're just eating and eating and eating, but from time to time you can still see his ribs. And so I wanted to go ahead and get a stool sample. And I got that sample submitted, and it came back as positive for strongyles, which is like a red worm, and it's in the intestinal tract. And the way that worms work in the horses is that the larva is crawling around in the pasture, and it's on the vegetation that they're eating. And then the horses eat it. And when the horses eat it, it gets into their intestinal tract. When it gets into their intestinal tract, it embeds itself into the intestines, and then it turns into a worm, and then it starts laying eggs. And it can lay up to 1,000 eggs. And then the horses poop it out of their manure, and then it when it hits the ground, it's just a warm, moist nest for those eggs to incubate in. And then they turn to a larva, and they go through several life stages in that larva phase. There's like 3 or 4 larva stages, but I think it's in the 3rd stage of the larva they get a sheath on them that is a protective sheath that protects them from cold weather, protects them from that type of stuff, so they can survive winters and rain and that type of stuff. And then they shed that sheathing, and then they become a 4th stage of a larva, and they start crawling around on the ground and getting into the vegetation and stuff, and then the horses eat them. And the whole life cycle, the whole deal starts all over again. So strongyles infects 80 to 99% of horses worldwide. But there's different and varying degrees of it. So when you submit a stool sample, they take the stool sample, and they have a special machine that analyzes it, and then it'll spit the results out. And if your count is 0 to 200 eggs per gram of manure, you're considered a low risk. And they typically don't do anything with that. Your horses are all of your horses most probably have worms. It's just part of having horses. And it sounds gross, but it's just part of it. But if you're 0 to 200, they typically don't do anything. They don't recommend a wormer or anything like that. If you're 200 to 500 eggs per gram of manure, you're considered a medium shedder, and they will recommend a wormer, and that wormer is based on the type of worm that it is. And then if you're 500 and above, you're considered a high shedder, and you're considered at risk. And if it goes untreated, it can cause, serious medical conditions on down the road. It can cause, bleeding and diarrhea and colic and intestinal swelling and all kinds of stuff. So it's important for you to get a fecal sample, a fecal egg count. It's called an FEC. It's where you take a stool sample and submit it to your vet, and just, they'll burn it, like I said earlier. If you just say, well, I'm not going to do any of that, I'm just going to go and buy a wormer and give them the wormer, Well, there was like 12 different wormers at the store when I went the other day, and I'm sure that several of them were the exact same wormer. They were just under a different brand name. But if you give the wrong wormer, it may not target the worm that your horse has. That's one of the things I was saying the other day. So it's important to get a fecal egg count and be on a fecal egg count program, at least annually, to know what type of worms and what type of wormer you need to deal with. Both Jean and Grace were medium shedders in January, and I treated them, and we'll check them again here in January. But when their results came back, remember 500 is considered high, anything above 500. And I was worried about Maximus, wasn't worried about Titus. Maximus's egg count was 1,148 eggs per gram of manure. That's, more than double what's considered high. Titus, he was 1,360 eggs per gram of manure. That was very high. So the recommendation was to treat them with ivermectin, and then after 3 weeks to treat them with Quest Plus, and then get them reevaluated in 2 months after that. So I treated them with ivermectin yesterday, and the vet will be out here in 3 weeks, and I'll have some Quest Plus on hand, and I'll just let them treat them when they're here. For their second, I'll let the vet administer the treatment when they're here. She wants me to scratch her butt. She might just want to show you her butt because she's got a sexy butt. So the ivermectin, it's a tube of it looks like a syringe, but it doesn't have a needle on it, and then it's just got a paste in it. And then the syringe, the part that you push in, it's got a dial on it, and you can screw it down, and you can dial it in for the weight of your horse. And that one tube will treat up to a 1,250-pound horse. So, but the vet, since their count was so high, the vet wanted me to administer the whole vial. And so that's what I did, and they had never had a wormer shoved in their mouth before, and they typically don't like it. They'll typically, lick and try to spit it out like when you try to give a dog a pill or something. But they did pretty well. I just tied them up to the grate there in the stall, and their head was kind of high, and then once I put it in, I just held their mouth closed until they, until it dissolved and they chewed it up a little bit. But they both did real good. And I was able to get that sticker cut off of Max's tail, finally. I'm going to show it to you and show you the amount of stuff that came off. I don't know if you can see. No, you can't see her head, but this is Jean right here. And she's got her head turned around. Now she wants me to scratch her other side. She got her ears turned around listening to me talking, and she's just sitting there with her eyes super heavy. They're so spoiled. You want them to see your butt? You got a pretty butt, don't you? Yeah, you got a pretty butt. So anyway, we got them done. And when you have high shedders, you can't go back any further, honey. When you have high shedders, okay, all right, they're done looking at your sexy butt. Don't look at me like that. She's like looking at me like, what do you mean they're done looking at my sexy butt? I get a lot of comments on her. I'll go back to the worms in a second, but I get a lot of comments. A lot of people think she's a Frisian cross because of her mane. She is a 100% registered Percheron. But she has got a long mane, and it gives her the Frisian appearance. And almost everybody that comes here thinks that she's a Frisian cross or a Frisian. And now here comes Miss Jean. Oh, you want me to scratch your butt some more? Here comes Miss Grace, I mean. No, ma'am, no, ma'am, no, ma'am. There's Miss Grace. So when you have a high shedder in your herd, they want you to do a couple of other things. They want you to either pick up manure, or they want you to spread the manure. And by picking up the manure, you're eliminating the larvae from your pasture. I don't have a manure picker upper. I don't know what it's called. But basically you drag it behind your, move your butt. You can drag it behind your ATV or behind your tractor, and it'll just collect it all. And then you can, put it in your compost pile or put it in your manure spreader and spread it. But what I do, the other thing they want you to do is they want you to spread the manure. And by spreading it, it breaks up those hot, moist nests, and it spreads it out like spreading peanut butter on a piece of toast. And what it does is it makes it so thin that it dries out, and then it kills the larva because it's not in that hot, moist nest anymore. And so you got to be on it pretty regularly, weekly, if not 2 times a week. So I do that. I do not pick up the manure. I do spread it. And what I do is I put a drag harrow behind the mule, and I just drag it behind the mule, my Kawasaki mule, not my driving mule that I don't have anymore. So I'm going to take you out there and show you the Kawasaki mule. I'm going to leave Titus and Max in their stalls. Let me show you the hair that came off of his tail. So this is the amount of hair that I had to cut off. And you can see all of the glue is just a huge amount of glue that they put on there. And there's so much glue on there that they put more glue on there than the sticker is big. And there's just no way to get it off unless you cut it. So it doesn't appear like very much, but when they don't have a tail to begin with, that's a lot. But I save all of these things. I've got 3 of them over there, and I save them just as a reminder so I can go back and reflect on it later on. By doing that ivermectin, it's attacking those worms, and it's going to kill a lot of the stuff in their system. It's not going to kill everything, but it's going to kill a lot of it. And then they're going to start pooping out a lot of junk, They don't have diarrhea, so they've got really solid manure. And it's very, very, let me back up a little bit. It's very common for foals to have a very high egg count because their immune system is not fully developed yet. So their immune system can't fight that stuff off. As your horses get older, their egg numbers, they tend to go down because they've kind of built up a resistance to them just with age. But it's very common for the young ones to have a high egg count. So don't be alarmed if you do a fecal egg count and you see a high number. So in 3 weeks, by giving them Quest Plus, it's going to have a different active ingredient in it, and that different active ingredient is going to attack what's still in there from a different angle. And then we will, in 2 months after that, we will take another stool sample and analyze that, and then we'll treat again if we need to. Ideally you want to be in the 0 to 200, which is common or ideal. So here's the drag harrow. It's a 5 foot by 4 foot, and it's small enough to pull behind the Kawasaki mule. And what I do is I just hook it onto the trailer hitch and just drag it. I would love to have like a 5 foot by 8 foot. 8 foot would bring it out to here, but I don't want to put such a load on the mule. You've all seen manure before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but that is basically a warm nest all bottled up, and you want to spread it. So if you look around, there's just manure all over the hay shed, all around the hay shed, not all over it, but all around it. They don't want to venture too far from it, so they just poop all around it. And that larva can get on the ground, and it can crawl and get over there and be right at the base of that food right there, and they'll eat it and they'll ingest them. So it's not a bad idea to have your hay elevated off the ground in a hay, feeder. But if you look, out and about in the pasture, there's not a lot of manure out there. And then there's nothing out front because the front's been closed off, and that's been resting for a couple of weeks, and I'll put them out there. We'll do some rotational here pretty soon, but right now they're in paddock 3, or they have access to paddock 3, but they're not really going in paddock 3 because right now they'd rather be eating the hay. So because they're eating the hay, they're tending to manure all around it. So I'm going to get on the spreader and I'm going to spread it around, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like after I've spread it. Okay, so now all the manure spread out. You can see how it just gets a big swath right there. And by breaking it down and spreading it out like that, the larva gets dried out and dies. So I drive around and do mine about once a week, but depending on the herd size that you have, you may have to do it more frequently. And I do this as just regular preventative anyway. I don't do it just because I have a high egg count. I do it all the time. It's part of my weekly chores out here. Now, like I told you in last video, Titus and Max like to poop here, so I've got to come and physically pick these up. And then it appears they're urinating right here. So I'll pick that up as well. But I think that Max likes to sleep right here in this area, which is why he's always dirty. The girls, the big blacks, they're gonna lay out here. And Titus is going to lay with them, which is why Titus is always clean. She got some water out of the windmill, and then she decided she wanted to get some more back. Let's go get these young ones out of the stalls. All right, so both Titus and Max both pooped in their stalls. So we're gonna have to police that up real quick and get that over into the compost pile. Let me see, I got his sticker off and his tail's kind of butchered, but like I said, it'll grow out. They're going to be a well-matched team. So I'll leave them over here in the barnyard for a little bit. They like this grass over here. I'm going to get the manure bucket and police up that manure and get it as clean as I can around here. So I appreciate you watching this week, and as always, remember who you are, be kind to those around you, stand up for what you believe in.